Ladies, gentlemen, gamers, and fellow One Piece enjoyers, welcome back. So, I finally watched the One Piece live action. So, as I usually do in these intros, I would like to describe my history with One Piece. So, when I was a little tyke, when I was about, I don't even know, like 5 years old or something, I was staying up later than I should have, especially for a school night. Or actually, no, it was on Saturdays, I think. But I was staying up later than usual on Cartoon Network, and eventually I saw a commercial for this new show coming on, and I was super, super excited. And I was like, what is this? It's a show about pirates. It looks really cool. I mean, granted, anything looked cool to me back then. I was a 5 year old, right? But lo and behold, the show that came out was One Piece. And I saw One Piece on Toonami, and I fell in love with it. I really liked One Piece. The opening is iconic to me as a child. That opening is one of the openings I still remember to this day. Yo ho ho, he took a bite of gum gum. Very very iconic. But safe to say, I've been a One Piece fan for the majority of my life, ever since I was a little tyke, right? And I'm a avid anime watcher. Now, granted, I haven't watched to current day. I stopped watching pre Wano because I got a job. But now that I'm unemployed, we're actually getting to things like, as people would see from my other reviews, JJK and everything. But, we're getting there. Now, One Piece is a hefty thing. I don't know if I'll get into that. But I thought as a little bit of a middle ground, I would watch the One Piece live action. So I did. And I have some pretty strong opinions on it. I will be straight that honest. First of all, let's get the elephant out of the room. A lot of times when something from anime, or video games for that matter, gets a live action, it is usually cursed to not be good. And originally, when I heard One Piece was getting a live action, I had no different thought than this. I thought this shit is going to be ass, and for multiple reasons. The first reason is One Piece is very, very stylized. Now, I'm going to try my hardest to not reveal what my opinions are about the show yet, but we'll see if it slips out here or there. But essentially, One Piece, the anime, is very stylized. Oda has his own sort of art style. Now, I personally don't think that a lot of these things look good in live action specifically. And I think One Piece is kind of one of those things where it's really hard, unless you use a lot of CGI, to bring the world of One Piece as it looks accurately one-to-one to the big screen, right? And this is where they obviously didn't make it a movie. It's One Piece, the live action show. But either way, I still think that it's going to be very, very hard. When I first heard they're making it, I was more curious to see how the fuck are they going to make certain things in One Piece look the same as they did from the anime. For instance, Alvida. Alvida is like a big fucking like boulder. Like she's huge in size relative to where you're, watching One Piece. But excuse me, because at certain points she looks different. And I'm gonna try my hardest, as always, in all of these reviews and videos, to not spoil too much, either for the anime or the show, the live action. But obviously take that with a grain of salt, because I'm gonna be referencing the anime a lot. But I'll try my best to keep clear of like major spoilers. But you should probably be familiar with One Piece or not. And that's one of the big things I do feel about this One Piece live action. It's very much for people who aren't even necessarily anime watchers. It's more for a very generalized audience. Now, is that good or bad? I will get into that. But my first concern, like I said, was will One Piece function in a live action format? Another thing I had a question of is One Piece is very, very long. I mean, it's one of the, I don't want to say the big three animes, even though it is in a different sense. Well, mangas really. But, One Piece, the anime, is a very, very long anime. It's not short. And I was thinking, like, unless they heavily rush through things, or they just make the live action really long, which I don't think they have the budget for. I mean, it's Netflix. I think they're always constantly losing money, but who knows? But I don't think, either way would be kind of good for how One Piece was in the anime. In totality, I thought it would be really hard to bring One Piece in many different ways to live action. And, regardless of what I think here, the reality is One Piece live action did very, very well. Statistically, revenue wise, everything, from what I've heard, now, honestly, I haven't looked this up myself, but I've heard it from others. Apparently, the One Piece live action is a very, very good show. And I think that is because, like I said before, it appealed to a generalized audience. But as a anime enjoyer, aside from just Rosa, because that made me hate One Piece, as an anime enjoyer, as a One Piece glazer, I would say, despite not even seeing Wano or Egghead yet, I really, really was skeptical of this. And I'll just pull the cat out of the bag here. I have some very, very strong opinions about the One Piece live action as an anime enthusiast, as a zealot of One Piece, if you would. So, what are my issues with One Piece? Well, obviously, number one, like I said, I thought it would be hard to bring it to the live action screen, and I think it is. There's a lot of stuff in the show that, if you are very like a zealot, like I am with One Piece, seeing certain things and what they did in the anime, and then seeing that to live action, how they changed it, I think kind of betrays the image of One Piece. Now, again, this is where I think if you're a generalized viewer, if you haven't seen the anime, if you're not really into anime, and you're just looking at the show in a bubble, I think it's a pretty decently solid show. I think it stands on its own. I think it's good. But comparison is most of the time a bad thing, but in this instance, I actually do believe it is a good thing. I believe comparison here, especially if you're an anime watcher, an anime enjoyer, if you're a zealot, it kind of really, I would say, shines a light on the live action. This is where a lot of people enjoyed it, and I'm probably going to be in the minority, but the one thing that I really, really disliked at first was a lot of stuff is different, and I don't ever think One Piece is a good anime to bring to live action because of the visuals. They had to change how a lot of characters look, especially Alvida. Alvida is normal sized, where again, One Piece is very stylized. I don't think these characters look good or they don't stay true to themselves if they're not like what they look like in the anime. And again, the anime is fantasy like. The anime is unrealistic. You have fucking Whitebeard who's like 20 plus feet tall. I don't know how they're gonna do Whitebeard in the live action when they get to them because apparently this live action is gonna go for a while. But I don't imagine it's gonna look good. And I'll give another example of Arlong. Arlong, who's in this season, because they're covering most of the East Blue, is in here and they changed a lot of stuff about his look where it's not even like bad necessarily, but I just think they could have made it more accurate to his actual person and it would have looked a lot better. And I don't understand why they can't. Now, again, I understand if it's a cost problem, right? And that's already another bad thing about bringing things to live action. There's a lot of more stipulations you have to fulfill that aren't really that much of an issue in animated form. CGI costs a lot of money, and they don't use too much CGI in here as much as I thought they would. But this is where, if they had unlimited budget, maybe they could solve this issue. But the characters looking like they looked really, again, just to me did not do them justice. And this is where, especially for Arlong, Arlong's nose to me literally looks like they just shoved toothpicks in it. They could have made it like to me. There's no excuse here other than like it was a artist's direction that they wanted to do. They wanted to make it this way because I don't see why they can't get like a VFX artist to make Arlong's nose look more like Arlong's nose. Maybe they just didn't like the look. Who knows? But I think the way it looked in here, it literally looked like a bunch of toothpicks on like a long stick, and I was like, what the hell is this? This doesn't look right. But there's other things where it's like they change a lot of characters' looks because some of them are just unrealistic without a lot of CGI, which then gets into the cost of this. And I heard the show was expensive. I don't know where it fully went. I mean, the show does have quality, obviously, but not in the places where I think kind of mattered. But either way, budget constraints aside, because I still have to review the show. Another big issue with the visuals is they take a lot of liberties. Now, I don't want to give my opinion on if this is a good or a bad thing. It's different from the anime, and the more different you are from the anime, the more I wouldn't say I'm upset necessarily, but the more I kind of think like it's not an adaptation. It's more they're taking their own direction. Now, again, this is pretty closely related to One Piece from the anime. You're gonna know what's going on if you see it. Nothing's really gonna surprise you, except the new stuff they put in, which I'll get to in a second. But on the visual side, another big glaring thing that's, again, not necessarily a negative or a positive depending on which area of the line you fall on, but they change and input a lot of characters that were not there. They make it very diverse where some people might be annoyed at it, some people might not care. I'm more in the camp of like I didn't care but I noticed it. And I know this gets some people upset. Some people like it too. I'm not saying people don't like it, but there's a lot of times where it's like there's a very very diverse group of cast of like people color wise, and it's just like, oh, they're kind of changing a lot of stuff. They're taking a lot of liberties, and they change how some characters look. And this is obviously a little bit of a meme in the community as well, where, oh, like here's the original and here's the Netflix adaptation, where they usually make someone a very different ethnicity than what they originally were. Which to me, I don't really think matters as long as that's not the focus of it. Anyone could play anything, I think, as long as it's not the focus. Because at the end of the day, it should really matter on the character. But and in One Piece, they do well because it really is not the focus. It doesn't matter what they are in this, but it's something I noticed, and it's something I know that some people are probably talking about. But I don't know for sure because I don't keep up with the communities. But either way, that was another issue I saw potentially for some people, where it's like they do change, if you're an anime watcher, a lot of stuff of the type of people included, which could be a bad thing, could be a good thing depending on where you're at. But here's the big kicker, and this is where I really was like, okay, I understand why they did it, but again, it's like, which side of the fence do you fall on? Which side of the line? In the live action, they change a lot. I don't want to say a lot because they do generally follow the story of the East Blue, but they obviously have to condense things because the season is 8 episodes. Now, because the season's 8 episodes and they're roughly 50 minutes to an hour long, they have to get through things quickly. But the biggest thing they did, and I can see why they did this. Again, it's not necessarily a bad or good thing. It's just a thing that I personally dislike. So I guess it's bad to me. They edited a lot of the story where they can make it make sense if they keep going with it, but it is different enough from the anime where it's like it'll make you raise your eyebrow of like how some stuff not only is happening but is especially going to happen in the future. There's a lot of events where people who weren't originally there are end up they end up being there in the live action. And I'll give just a little bit of a spoiler here. One of the people who it is, it's Garp. Garp is basically one of like the big bad villains in this arc, and they actually I feel like changed Garp's personality a lot. They changed some people's personality. Buggy is one of them. Garp is a big one where again they're not fully accurate to their anime counterpart. Where Buggy's more silly and stupid, and this thing he's more like serious and more I guess trying to be scary, even though he's not scary, but maybe some people feel that way. He's more of a stupid idiot, but not really a funny clown that's like comedic. He's more of like a guy who's like cringe almost. But Buggy's an example of it. Garp is everywhere where he wasn't originally in the anime. So they do change up the story in pretty decent ways. And this is where I think again, it really has to do with the director's direction, the artist's direction of they just wanted it this way, they thought it would be better. And this is where apparently for the story and for the whole thing of the live action, they had Oda's approval. They had him there supervising it. So it really begs you the question of like, oh, did Oda just think this would be a better thing for the general audience? Did he think it would be a better thing for the live action? Did he secretly have a gun to his head and they made him do it for money? Who really knows? We kind of just got to go with what's there. And apparently Oda approved all this. But again, as an anime watcher, I was a little jarred by it to think like, okay, it's not a faithful one-to-one adaptation, which isn't necessarily a bad thing, but they're changing some stuff where it's changing the character where it's like I don't necessarily know if I like these characters as much anymore because I have this image of them in my head from the anime and they're not like that in the live action. So it's really, pick your poison, which one do you like more? But I'm sticking with the anime. Almost everything from the anime, and I don't know if this is a sad thing, but it is the reality. I like more than the live action. I think everything is done better in the anime if you're willing to sit through a long haul slog. Because again, the One Piece live action is condensed. It is a lot faster. And maybe that's why they changed some of the story just to make things make sense later on or even in the current season just to keep up with the pacing of stuff. But I personally didn't like that. So already here's some of the glaring issues. A lot of characters are changed with how they look, which they have to be because of the nature of live action. A lot of characters are in there that sometimes shouldn't even be there. Prime example being Garp. A lot of characters act different from how they were, and then some things just outright get changed like in a big way. One of the big villains of the Sanji arc in the anime is there for like a minute or two in the live action, and he just completely gets tossed aside for a new villain. And again, I can understand if they say it and justify it with time purposes, but again, as an anime watcher, I wanted something a little bit more closer to the anime in terms of story. And for a lot of general people, or even people who watch the anime, this might be fine for them. It wasn't fine for me, personally. I still think, again, the anime is better in almost every respect, if you like that sort of thing. It's just not my fancy. I don't want to say it's bad, but I kind of am saying it's bad if you compare it to the anime. Now, another big issue I had with this whole thing is the fighting was kind of suck ass. Now, One Piece, again, in anime form, it has pretty good fights. Now, again, early on, there's not much, but, comparison is the enemy here. You can't compare early One Piece to where it is now. And I don't even know where it is now in current day. I'm comparing it from everything up until right where Wano starts. There's a lot more of like Luffy showing off his power with the gum gum fruit. There's a lot more world building, which again, that just has to do with pacing of the story. But just fighting alone, and again, this obviously comes because they had to condense it and stuff, but I didn't feel like the fighting was that good. And it really feels like they were either limited by the budget and they didn't want to use the CGI too much, or they were really just focusing not on fighting too much because they can't do it too well in live action format. But it was just like I did not feel like the fighting was that good. There was a lot of times where Luffy just outright felt like a weak wimp. And I was like, okay, he's either one-shotting someone, which I guess sometimes might have happened in the anime, maybe. But there's other times where it's like he's either one-shotting someone or he's just getting tossed around and fucked. And there's a lot of times where, and obviously this happens in a lot of shows, but I always argue the levels, right? There's a level where you just have to ignore certain things that don't make sense, and it's for the sake of plot and story. And I'll give you a great example, and I'm not going to try and spoil it here, but there's a villain in the live action that is very, very strong. He's very fast, he's very strong, and he's giving Luffy an issue. And this guy had so many opportunities, and there's a lot of times like this in the show, where there's a lot of opportunities for the villain to just outright win, to kind of just like kill Luffy or just get like a really easy shot at him. And there's a lot of times where Luffy is literally letting it happen, like he's not moving, he's not defending himself, and they either just stop to like scare him or prove a point, or then just talk to him. Where they obviously have times where they can kill him. And again, this always happens in anime, right? It's the common trope of like, oh, I'm gonna talk before we really get into it. I'm not gonna use my final move first. But it's like they have moves that are working and they have obvious shots where they can easily just kill Luffy, but they just don't. And even Luffy at the end of the day, like, aside from closer towards the end of the anime, he really doesn't use his Gum Gum powers much. And there's not just much fighting in general. I feel like the fighting, while it was choreographed decently well at certain points, especially for the other supporting cast, like, Nami, Sanji, Zoro, not really much of Usopp, and I'll talk about that later. But, like, I really feel like the fighting just wasn't as much of the anime, or as the anime, and it just didn't look as good. Like there's some times where if they just made it last a little bit longer or used like the powers a little bit more, it would have looked better. But a lot of the fights seemed goofy, didn't make sense, past an allowable limit, by the way. Because again, a lot of like anime does this where if you apply logic, it doesn't make sense. But they were applying too little logic here, where it seemed nonsensical and stupid. And again, if that's for the general audience, maybe it's okay. But as an anime watcher and as an intellectual, I'd like to say, it really, really upset me. And just a lot of the fighting seemed like just not that good, even though it was choreographed decent well again for everyone else. But Luffy just didn't use his powers enough and just felt weak most of the time. And one of the fights, especially later on, just felt like the villain like was just tossing Luffy around. Like, okay, I'm grabbing you, I'll toss you here. Okay, I'll grab you again, I'll throw you there. And that's doing like a lot of damage. It doesn't make sense. And again, CGI, they probably had to save money on it. I don't know. They should have been working with a good budget, so they should have been able to do it more, in my opinion. But at that point, it's either they ran out of money or it's the director's direction that he wanted to take. He, she, I don't know. But I just did not enjoy the fighting. The fighting was not that good. I feel like it could have been way better, and the anime, again, is just better with it. Now, another thing with the main cast, right? This is where I'll go into them. The good thing about the main cast is I think look wise, they nailed it with the main cast. Zoro looks amazing 1-to-1. Luffy, pretty good. He's alright. Nami, pretty good. Sanji, pretty good. Except there's a little bit of an issue, and same with Usopp. Sanji and Usopp are the two characters where visually they make sense, and I actually think Usopp's actor really, really fits him very well. They're all great actors, by the way. Like, none of them act bad. The acting was pretty good. But the issue is they changed, I feel like, some of their personalities a little bit. So Sanji isn't as accentuated. Actually, before I go into that, let me talk about the visuals. Sanji and Usopp are missing some of their core visuals. And again, this is a problem of bringing anime to live action. There's certain things that happen in the show where Nami gets like a certain thing on her arm, or Sanji has like twirly eyebrows, or Usopp has a long nose, that again, either for comfortability of the actor or for, I don't know, director's direction or for money constraints or whatever, they just didn't add these things. And again, it's like, okay, I mean, it's fine with some of them. Like Usopp, I don't mind him having a long nose, but Usopp's pretty good of an actor. At least in terms of like looking like Usopp, but it's like, damn, I really wish he had his nose, because in the anime it's a trope where he just gets his nose broken and it's silly and it's funny. And God knows how they're going to do Usopp. But Sanji has the twirly eyebrows. That's missing here too. There's a lot of regular stuff here from the characters that is not that apparent anymore, and some stuff that ends up happening that doesn't look as meaningful or as different as it should from the anime. So again, it's just the limit of live action. But this is where Sanji, personality-wise, and Usopp is pretty spot on with how he's in the anime. Sanji is a little different, and this is one of the complaints I had. Sanji felt a little bit too different, where they kind of toned down his bad parts, aside from him feuding and bickering with Zoro, right? Because Zoro is his like main, I guess, arch enemy, even though they're allies. But he's like his little like rival. Zoro and Sanji being rivals is pretty good. It's pretty well done. It's accurate. But they didn't lean enough, or they barely did. They did a little bit, but not as much as they do in the anime. Where again, in the anime, Sanji bleeds from his fucking orifices when he sees a woman. But I feel like the Sanji personality was toned down in terms of liking women, which is good. I personally like that, but it's different. And they're obviously going from a different feel from the anime. They want it to be different, but I think it's a little too different for my liking. And same thing with Usopp. Now, this isn't really a complaint with Usopp's looks or personality. I think his personality is spot on. His looks, aside from him not having the long nose, I think he's perfect. The main issue is that some characters in the show shine, other characters really don't do shit, and it's mainly Usopp. For most of the show, and again, this is like a light spoiler, but I feel like Usopp's impact was non-existent. Like, he almost barely did anything. Only at the very end did he do like one thing, and it was a pretty good thing. I think it's pretty nonsensical because it has to do with fighting, and fighting I think was not done well in this live action. But aside from that, Usopp almost essentially has no role to play. And you kind of argue like what role does he play in the anime? But I feel like they justify his role a little bit better as the sniper in the anime than they ever do in the live action. The live action, I can count on my hand like the one or two things he did that actually had relevance. And it's hard. Maybe three if I'm extremely pushing it, but he really did not do much. He was just there for like comedic purposes and because he was there in the anime. So I feel like they didn't do much with Usopp. They didn't do Usopp well in terms of story utilization. But character look wise, aside from the nose, and personality wise, he was spot on. And typically all the actors are great except for one more thing personality wise, and that's Luffy. They did something that is often done in Dragon Ball in the dub versus the sub. In the sub of Dragon Ball, Goku is more of a goofy clown. In the dub of Dragon Ball, Goku is a way more righteous, justice like person. And this is where their portrayal of Luffy in the anime really felt kind of forced with a very specific idea in mind. And Luffy's whole thing, which again, this is different from the anime. Like, it's kind of like this now in the anime more, but it took a long time to get to, and Luffy doesn't push it as hard. But again, when you're going for a general audience, sometimes you have to spoon feed them, which I don't like because maybe I'm just not part of the general audience. But Luffy, a lot of times in this show, sat there, talked to people, and always emphasized, like, oh, I love freedom. I love, like, what's right. I love people following their dreams, this, and that. And there's glimpses of that you get in the beginning of One Piece, but it doesn't really come too apparent until later on. And even when it is apparent, it's not pushed, I feel like, as hard as it was in the live action. Luffy really pushes that shit, and he always has to tell people, like, I'm a different pirate. I'm this different thing from all of you guys. Like, he has to accentuate it. And he never really did that in the anime. This is where, in some very stark ways, especially with accentuating what he is and kind of arguing for what he believes in, he does that way more in the live action than he ever did. And it really makes it feel like, again, they're just spoon feeding you, like, hey, we gotta make sure you know that Luffy is a different pirate and he's a nice guy and he values this, and that. It's like they're showing, or no, they're telling and not really showing. Well, they're showing too, but they're telling and showing, where a lot of the times you want to show and not tell too much. So I didn't really like what they did with Luffy that way. Other than that, he's pretty much the same Luffy. But again, even Luffy's fights were not that good. He didn't use Gum Gum as much as I thought he would. Sometimes his fights just end in like a very quick bout with him using like the one move, except later on. Later on, the fights do get better, but it's just like, I just think the fighting was terrible. Some of the characters really either do nothing like Usopp, or like they're just way, I don't want to say dumbed down, but a lot different and a lot more just like spoon feedy like Luffy is to the audience. And too many things are too different from the anime essentially, and not in ways that I think are too good unless you're a very general audience. And that's kind of the whole vibe I got with the live action of, it's just really not for a person like me who wanted a more serious, not necessarily one-to-one adaptation, but a less generalized adaptation where things are kind of cooler. But again, I just think overall One Piece can't be too well adapted to live action. I know people like this, and I know obviously statistics are against me here, but personally, and that's what these always are. These are always my personal opinions. I really was whatever. I was neutral with the One Piece live action. I understand its role. I understand kind of who it's for. It really wasn't for me. I'm gonna see more of it because why not? I do love One Piece enough to watch it, but the biggest enjoyment I had from watching the live action was honestly just seeing how much different it is from the anime and kind of chuckling or thinking like, wow, this is dumb. I'm not gonna say I hated it, but I definitely don't think like if they never made this, I'd be fine with it. Even if, general people would miss out. Watch the fucking anime. That's basically what it culminates into. Just watch the fucking anime. I think this thing was so weird. They changed a lot of stuff. They added some points in that just didn't make sense. They changed a lot of scenes from how they originally happened. And like I said, it's just too different and not in good ways. So overall, to kind of wrap it up and to kind of put a grading on the live action, and I like to do it out of a 10, 5 always being neutral. It's not good, it's not bad. I would give the One Piece live action a tough like 6 out of 10. And one other thing I have to say is that again, some of these characters, even though they tried to make them one to one, you really can't because of like how stylized One Piece is, but they did try. But sometimes to me, they just end up looking so goofy and so silly, it's like ridiculous. Like you see what they're looking like in the live action version, where this guy might be like a mouse, but like he's just wearing a mouse costume. And again, it does look one to what it would have been like in the anime, but it just doesn't look right in live action to me. And other examples like Arlong, I just think they just straight up did wrong. I think they could have done way better with his nose, and they didn't. Other times they just ignored certain characters' features. They made certain ones like Arlong's worse, or it just looks silly and stupid. Like for one example, Mihawk. Mihawk is in the show, and again, this is where I'm probably in the minority, but I just thought he looked so goofy. Like, there's certain characters that when they just show up on screen, they look so goofy and I almost can't take it seriously because it's so, I don't want to say off putting, but so divorced from, like, what stuff should look like. I don't know. Like, I'm not saying it's low quality, it's just kind of jarring. It's just something I don't think needed to be live action. So, overall, I'm going to rate this a 5.5 Jolly Rogers, or I guess, Rogers out of 10, King of the Pirates, because I just don't think this needed to exist. The only reason it's not a 5 is because I like seeing how different it is from the anime, but at the same time, it does get me a little upset. It's just this show really wasn't for me, man. I swear to God. Like, if you're a general person, or if you can really suspend your disbelief and look at it on its own, you're probably gonna like it, and you might not even share my sentiments. Even if you do like the anime and you've seen the anime, you might like this too. But I personally didn't. I think this is better viewed if you've never watched One Piece. It's a great way to get into it. It's very condensed. It is different. So at that point, I would say you could still watch the anime and be surprised. But the anime is a slog. I do understand that. But I think the longer the better, personally. But overall, I just really was just not happy with the live action. I'll be real. And I think 5.5, I'm giving it tough, but it's a good thing. It's just really not for me, and it's not bad. So I don't want to put it below neutral. And I kind of did enjoy some funny parts of it because at a certain point it looked so nonsensical in live action format. It did make me laugh, but the fights to me weren't that good. The story changed a little bit too much, and it really felt too spoon feedy. The characters, the visuals, they're all top quality. It's just I don't think it works in this medium. Excuse me. But overall, I would rate One Piece a 5.5 out of 10. 5.5 Rogers. And that's about it. I don't really know where they're gonna go with the story. I'll probably watch the rest of it. I don't think I'll enjoy it. I don't think I'll love it with the direction they're going. But it is what it is. But anyway, I hope everyone enjoyed, and I hope you all watch me at Twitch TV/Tecnics channel. E.